Yeah, I think so, Dan, I appreciate it. I think first on the agenda, we have Dr. Sean make some his chairman's remarks. Sean, over to you.
All right. Like I say, we have started these conversations. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening for those different time zone. Thank you for joining this. This is going to be the second webinar as we continue to address the AI regulations. How do we work together, okay, to drive more regulations, how to use AI for betterment of our society and our human being. Okay, I say I'm not going to go too much about the long message. Again, the stage is all the panelists today. Okay, and then I'll pass the time to my deputy chairman, Robert. Okay, perhaps to lead the way forward. Okay, again, this is going to be, I joined the first sessions. Okay, it's very enlightening. Okay, AI is something new to me, but after attending the CES dark, okay, and it gave me a lot of different perspective of how AI, generative AI, all this could do good as well as not so good for human being. So I hope through these collaborations among various associations, various expertise from around the world, okay, WITSA can take the positions to drive this forward. And a bit of a discussion that we had yesterday with the new digital minister in Malaysia. Again, the interest among, like I say, in Malaysia is also aligned with what we have discussed. Again, a lot of initiatives are being pushed forward, including perhaps setting up an AI center of excellence in this part of the world. So with that, the declaration that we signed, we have in WCIT in Sarawak last year. I think the series of AI webinars that we have, I hope we can actually bring more participants, okay, to this seminar, to this webinar, and I'm looking forward to the AI Summit in Rio in coming March. With that, I pass the floor to Robert. You want to say a few things?
Thank you very much, Sean. I was wondering if maybe we should do a quick roll call. Should we do that?
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, I'll begin with myself. I'm Anders Halvorsen. I'm a Vice President for Policy at WITSA. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Michael Nelson at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C., and I've been working on tech policy around the world for more than 35 years.
Hi, Mike.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again. You look good.
You would just want to go in order off the screen, Dan, and then Robert. Do you want to do it that way?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dan Iku. I'm the CEO of WITSA, the successor to Dr. Jim Poison, our former Secretary General. I've taken on this role, and it is my pleasure to now serve on the Secretariat, having been Chairman of WITSA from 2008 to 2012. Very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so Robert Jansen, Deputy Chairman for WITSA and Chairman for the AI Task Force. We are very committed to getting the word out and how the private sector needs to be an influencer in establishing what are the main and best practices guidelines for applying AI in every dimension of society. I'll have a little bit more. Anders, back to you.
Thank you. And Sean, you already introduced yourself, so
I have.
Next on the list here, we're just going to continue in quick order. We got Julia Lab 245.
Karine, I see.
Anders, if I can suggest, because not everybody's going to be on right now, so why don't you have audience members just put their bios in the chat and then introduce Karine and introduce so the speakers can all be introduced at once, but let's the audience members just put their bios in the chat.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If that's agreed,
Let's-
Karine, welcome to the webinar.
Yes, let's get things going.
Okay. So very quickly, we got, do we want to just do a quick introduction from the other panelists first?
Please.
No, Karine?
Sure. So my name is Karine Brissett, and I head the unit, the AI policy unit at the OECD's digital economy policy, the section of the OECD that deals with all things digital. And I've been working on AI since 2016, and before that, have been in tech policy for, I think, longer than I want to admit on this call. On a bunch of different issues. And so at the OECD right now, I'm in charge of the OECD Policy Observatory, OECD.ai, the OECD Working Party on AI Governance, which is the official intergovernmental working group on AI, as well as the OECD network of experts on AI, which is a very big group of 400 experts that kind of really supports our work from all sectors of the economy. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karine.
Great to be here today.
Thanks, Karine.
And we got Doug over at CTA.
Hi, everyone. Doug Johnson. I'm Vice President, Emerging Technology Policy at the Consumer Technology Association in the United States. I also serve as the current chair of the WITSA Policy Committee, and I'm another one of the speakers here today. Thank you.
And
And I believe we have one more, Robert, from the Museum of the Future. We got our panelist.
Ricardo?
Yes.
Go ahead.
That would be me, right?
yes,
Hi, everyone. My name is João Falcão. I'm the head of Museu do Amanhã here in Rio, so Museum of Tomorrows. I've been working with AI for at least 10 years now, as an entrepreneur, as a lawyer, and as an investor. And I'm also finishing a PhD on AI, asking some of the questions that I'm sharing with you today. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
hi.
Thank you. So I think we are ready to move on.
Welcome, Jean-François.
Okay. Yeah, welcome everybody. So
Welcome.
next on the agenda, we got Robert Jansen, the moderator's introduction. Robert, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Anders. Definitely not going to take 10 minutes. I just want to highlight the effort that WITSA is promoting and taking the word out of how AI should be looked upon and how it can influence positively our society and improve greatly the lives of everyone. So we have devised of creating a webinar series after we produced a policy paper to be a guideline for all these government authorities around the world, and policymakers that can help understand that we cannot put a straitjacket on AI. And yes, while we're safeguarding privacy and all specific direct rights that every citizen has, at the same time be able to foster and fast track innovation. So here is a policy paper that we have built over the last 8 months under the guidance of Anders and his team. And with the purpose that we can get the word out that the AI is probably the impact just as the steam engine or internet had in society overall. We are at the very early stage of seeing how these things are going to fall into place. There's a lot still to come through. But we need to start establishing what are the main best practices and guidelines that one should follow, so we really make the best potential and deliver on the promise of AI. So this webinar and the one we had before and the ones that are coming forward over the year, plus the AI Summit in Rio, are all tools, communication tools for us to get the word out and influence the policymakers and government authorities to have the best framework possible and leverage what all AI has the promise to provide us. So I am very glad that we have a very, team here today with Karine, with Mike, with Doug, and our WITSA executive team, Dr. Sean, Dan, and Anders. We also have one of our board members here, Alex Mora. All of these are volunteer people who are trying to make the best that we worldwide are able to fine-tune what is the best positioning for us in AI and how that actually relates to the betterment of humanity. With all that, I just want to pass it back to you, Anders, and so we can kickstart our webinar today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate the introduction. So, as you mentioned, the WITSA policy paper was developed with the input of all of our members, in 80 countries around and regions around the world, and we also partner with some trusted industry partners and colleagues. Much thanks go to you, Robert, who is heading up our AI task force, and Doug, who is our policy chairman. So appreciate that. As we went through this paper in some detail during our previous workshop on December 13th, I'd just like to briefly show some of the key principles here, just quickly go through them, or to show them rather. The paper is available on the WITSA website for those who wish to take a closer look. As Sean and Robert mentioned in their remarks, whether the promise of AI will deliver on its potential really depends on how well businesses, AI developers, governments, and other stakeholders manage the perceived risks while fostering a regulatory environment that encourages innovation, best practices, and voluntary standards, and international collaboration. So I'm just going to flash here. If there's a couple more slides. I'm not going to go through them in detail here unless anybody has any questions. The recent acceleration in both the power and visibility of AI systems and growing awareness of their abilities and defects have raised fears, as we all know, that the technology is advancing so quickly that it cannot be safely controlled. But as the paper explains, exaggerated and misleading concerns about AI's tools and potential to cause harm has sometimes crowded out reasonable discussions about the technology, leading to what we call a tech panic. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with that. I'm just going to go through here. The fear that machines will steal jobs, centuries old. New technology generally creates jobs that replace the ones that have been lost. Machines tend to be able to perform some tasks, not others, increasing demands for people who do the jobs machines cannot. The degree of existential risks posed by AI is hotly debated, but all involve a huge amount of guesswork and a leap from today's technology. Even experts sometimes overstate the risk of their own areas. Imposing heavy regulation today can often be an overreaction. When regulation is warranted, it is more for near-term impacts than to save humanity from extinction. As we all know, existing AI systems raise real concerns about bias, privacy, intellectual property rights, elections, and as the technology continues to advance, other problems may still become apparent. The key to advance the promise of AI with a sound judgment of the actual risks and to be able to adapt accordingly, recognizing and enforcing existing rules capable of tackling harms that may arise from it before considering any new AI-specific legislation is essential. And then finally, as the panic over AI innovations such as generative AI enters its most volatile stage, policymakers should recognize that the predictable cycle we are in and proceed cautiously regarding any regulatory efforts so as not to harm AI innovation. And with that, I think we could come over to our CEO, Dan.
Thank you, Anders. I just want to quickly add before passing on to the panelists that it has been an exciting ride for WITSA as we undertake the duty we feel for us to adopt and to take up the mantle as the tip of the spear for AI to make sure that AI gets the exposure it deserves. That has started even as far back as our WCIT to 2022, but certainly last year when we released the position paper on AI, and then had the AI declaration, and even WCIT in Kuching itself was imbued and was AI-centric. And therefore, things that we've been doing, I think, is prove that we are serious about this, to the extent that we are now considering setting up WITSA AI centers of excellence in each of the 6 continents that we are active in. So that is currently, we are working very hard on that plan. So we hope to be able to update everyone else in the next board meeting. With that, Anders, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So let's move promptly ahead on the agenda. We got Karine Preset from the OECD. Welcome. Or Karine, do you have any slides you would like to show, or do you want to just proceed?
No, no, I don't have slides. I'll just maybe, I've been tasked with giving sort of a panoramic view of AI policy developments in 10 minutes, so I'll try to do that. It's a big topic. So first of all, maybe just for those of you who aren't familiar with what the OECD is, because it's not a very well-known, and it's kind of a small organization by intergovernmental standards. It is an intergovernmental organization that's based in France, in Paris, that has a number of countries that are democracies and market economies, and that work together sort of on, on common policy and good practices and things like that. And depending on the topic, work with a lot of other countries and a lot of stakeholder groups. And the key purpose of the OECD, the mandate is really and building consensus on good policies. So AI is obviously more and more of a key topic. We've been working on AI since 2016, and in 2019 developed the first intergovernmental sort of good best practices on, or standard on AI, which was the OECD AI principles. And these were then taken up by the G20. So this is kind of the foundation for all of our work since then, is kind of these sort of like 10 principles. They're not 10 commandments by any means, but they're 10 principles that kind of are not a Christmas tree of everything and anything that AI can and should do, but it's kind of we tried to highlight those things that are different or really significantly amplified with AI. So both on the positive side and on the risk side. So you've got kind of five principles that are sort of focused on human-centric AI, that are more like about ensuring robustness, transparency, explainability, and that kind of thing. That's more focused on the risk side and trustworthy AI. And then 5 principles that are about, well, what should governments do about this? And what does it mean for jobs and skills? What does it mean for innovation policy and so on? So since then we've been working. We got our key focus areas have been really sort of the core frameworks for policy, like definitional work, kind of the nitty-gritty. Definitions are really hard, but they're really important, and they're really foundational for international agreements. You really need to have a common understanding of a word, like what does AI mean? To start with, that's been a hard one to agree on internationally, but it's really important to have that if you're gonna want to have your policies and regulations interoperate. So that kind of thing, or frameworks for classifying AI systems, or how do we define AI? What's an AI incident? What are the things we need to know about an AI incident? So we work on this kind of foundational work on the AI system lifecycle that supports kind of a lot of the sectoral work, and then we also work on sort of those topics that require. And most topics today in AI do require, cross different parts of governments, different parts of policy to talk to one another. So it's not enough to have your data protection authority dealing with privacy, because that's going to be a narrow angle. And there's so many other issues that are not privacy related that you really can't have just that narrow angle. So it's bringing that kind of cross-disciplinary angle. And then the third thing that's really characterizes our work is kind of building that evidence base. So we try to provide on OECD.ai resources that can help inform policies with lots of trends and data, what's going on, how fast are things moving, where, what sector, who's investing where, what, and which countries are doing the best on, are doing well on skills, developing the skills in their population to benefit from AI, where the job demands, where our incidents are occurring, in what sectors, what are the risks that we thought were going to materialize that are actually materializing, and then or into harms and incidents, and what, on the other hand, are things that we thought were going to be risks and that didn't turn out to actually materialize in practice. So it's really that evidence basis. So with that, maybe just to say, Anders asked me. We had a prep call last week and was asking me to give an overview of recent tech developments and associated challenges and opportunities. So I think most of us are kind of quite. I think those are quite talked there, but they've been really talked about. From late 2022 when AI really became real to everyone with ChatGPT. That's been the fastest growing consumer application in history. So I think a lot of us are aware of ChatGPT and the associated generative AI sort of trend because it's so visible and it's so user friendly and it has so many users. And so I know Mike doesn't think that's the future, but I still think it's a hugely important. I know everyone's heard a lot about it, but it's still hugely important in terms of all the things that it's making possible, like real personalization of content, automating tasks, improving productivity, and a lot of really boring stuff that we don't see, but that are actually some of the very top applications of generative AI, which is like labeling unstructured data, which is something humans don't like to do. It's very boring. And there are a lot of other very boring things that humans don't like to do, like sorting, classifying trash, recyclables, plastic bottles, that kind of thing. So it's having an impact everywhere, and in every single sector. And some are moving much faster than others. I just point to finance and health as some of the really fast movers here. Surprisingly, agriculture is a pretty fast mover too. But at different speeds. This is really permeating all sectors of the economy and society. So that's one that I would point out in terms of also yielding a lot of benefits across sectors. And then now we're combining more and more those sort of AI systems with agents, but agents that are actually able to do something for us. So the basic example is like the interaction between an AI system, like a personal assistant that will know that, okay, I need a haircut, actually I do, and that will be able to schedule that for me without my having to necessarily tell it or call and make the appointment myself, or a dentist or whatever. And that's kind of the simple version, but then there are a lot of other very much more sophisticated agent based systems that can actually have an impact in the real world. And so those being combined with AI systems is opening up a whole new world of sort of productivity gains, but also potential risks, particularly when you have agents that are embodied, have a physical embodiment in a sort of like some robotic form or a car or whatever the case may be, and that can have an action in the real world and impact safety. So physical safety. So that's another trend. And then directly related. We really see this starting maybe this year, and I guess probably next year and the following one, the next 2-3 years, really robotics taking off. So okay. Sorry.
Yeah, hello everybody. I think that if anybody that is not speaking, please mute yourself just to make sure we don't get any unnecessary interference. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe just a few points that are important here. There are lots of risks. We celebrate AI successes, and there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of risks. Lots of risks: safety, security, safety, privacy, information integrity. In Europe, people tend to call it disinformation, and potential to exacerbate inequalities hugely, and issues of concentration. Those are very much on the radar of policymakers everywhere. I'd just point out here that, in surveys we've done, the risks associated with disinformation were the top concern of all the countries, of all the policymakers that we've interacted with. That's the top systematically sort of concern of all at the political level. And this also is related to the fact that this year we'll have half of the world's population voting. So I won't get into, maybe later in discussion, I'll be happy to talk about. There's just been a lot of action in the G20, in the G7, in the Global Partnership on AI, at the OECD, in the Council of Europe, at the US level, in different agencies at the level in the White House, at the White House level, but also in commerce and in NIST and standardization efforts. So there's just plenty of things happening everywhere. In Brazil too, Brazil is emerging as one of the leaders. I'm mentioning that because I realize some of you are in Brazil or soon going to be. Brazil is emerging as one of the leaders in AI governance, and is also presiding the G20 this year. So they really have a packed agenda on AI. So those are just a few of those, and then of course the UK Safety Summit and many more. So I'm happy to get into those, and I realize that I'm at the 10 minutes, so I won't get into them now, but happy to afterwards. Thanks. Back to you, Anders.
Yeah, thanks, Karine. Yeah, as you mentioned, and as we also mentioned on the prep call, it's not just that there's a lot of stuff going on. You mentioned the AI Global AI Summit, the G7, Hiroshima, the G20, the UN, but the OECD, as I understand, has been very instrumental in supporting many of these initiatives. I don't know if you just want to spend a minute just talking a little bit about how the OECD has had a direct involvement in some of these efforts. I don't know if you just want to quickly mention some of those activities, because I know that OECD is very important to a lot of the international activities that is going on right now.
Sure. So the OECD kind of has a think tank role, but but works closely with governments. So we're working very closely with the European Union, for example, in the context of the EU AI Act, with the Council of Europe too. They're developing a treaty. We've worked closely with the UK in preparing their Bletchley summit, and we've traditionally and still do support the G7 and G20, which are not organizations but initiatives, and so we support them with, for example, for helping them with what the impetus for what they want to deliver in a given year is driven by the country that has the presidency of the initiative. So Japan last year with the Hiroshima AI process, but we did a lot of support work, for example, surveying and drafting and stuff like that to support their work, and we do that with the G20 as well. And so discussions are starting there. Now we've started discussions with the Italian presidency of the G7 this year. So the OECD plays a support role in many of these initiatives because it brings together those governments that have that are participating in these initiatives politically, but we kind of bring that the analytical and the evidence-based and the sort of policy analysis work to support the work of these initiatives, and it's really quite broad. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, and I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. Okay, so we will move promptly along. We have Doug, we have you. So let's see here. I need to make you a co-host, I think, if I can get off the presentation mode here. Let's see here. Yeah, let's see here. I'm not sure why.
While Anders is bringing that up, I'll go ahead and reintroduce myself, as some people joined after we got started. Once again, Doug Johnson. I'm our Vice President of Emerging Technology Policy at the Consumer Technology Association. We're based in the United States, and certainly have been active. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Anders. Just needs to be in presentation mode.
Yeah. Not sure.
Are you going to drive it from your end then? I can't share the screen.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know why, but I'm not able to make you. Maybe I am. Dan, I don't know. Can you make him? I think you are made yourself a host. I don't know if Dan, if you can make Doug a co-presenter, can you?
Yeah, make him a co-host.
Give me.
Anders, what?
Yeah, either way, Anders, if you want to drive it, that's fine.
Let's just go to slide share mode, and then Doug can tell you next.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Anders, if you want to drive it from there, that's fine. You can go on to the next one. Anders, do you want to advance the slide?
Yes. Okay. I think maybe it's a confusion. Right now, I am on slide number 3, AI highlights from CES 2024. Is this do you see that? Or?
No. Why don't you go to slide share mode, and then you can.
Oh, right. Okay, hold on.
You gotta come out and come back in.
I see. Okay, hold on.
What we need is an AI solution.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, now.
And then share the.
Yeah, I
click
got
the PowerPoint again.
Sorry for that. So anyway, so I'll start at the beginning, and then
okay, there you go. Okay, that'll work. That'll work. All right.
Sorry about that, Doug.
Let's get going. Next slide, or I guess the second slide. There you go. So I organized my presentation this way. I wanted to take a look back as recent as earlier this month at our CS trade show. Anders asked me to give an overview and an understanding of how AI manifested itself at this big global tech gathering just a few days ago. And then, of course, a look back on the policy making of last year. I also want to take a look forward in terms of what's on our radar, some of the salient activities that some of you are probably directly engaged in, and how we look at legislation at my organization, and then a look out, or a look at some of the challenging aspects. And certainly this is not a complete list, so I just wanted to highlight a couple of challenging areas for us with respect to AI regulation and public policy. Next slide, please. So heading into last month's CES, our CEO had this quote, and I think it's very fitting. AI really is and was the story of CES 2024 this year. It showed up in every which way across the show floor, in conference sessions and conversations and media coverage, in CEO keynote addresses. It really was an overarching theme of this year's event. Next slide. And as I mentioned, it appeared just about everywhere. The show is a very large event, so I think it's meaningful that it was talked about in so many different ways from so many different stakeholder perspectives. It's not just the tech industry at this event. We have a lot of other industry sectors that are represented there, from healthcare to agriculture, environmental sustainability interests, mobility interests. And I think just about each one of these sectors and stakeholder groups had something to say or show with regard to AI technology. Next slide. There are a couple of, there were some humorous examples of the show, a little bit humorous, I thought. I don't have a cat, but I thought this was kind of funny that there was an AI-enabled cat door that would distinguish most of the time whether the cat was trying to bring a mouse into the house. So you had examples like this at CS too. But next slide. A good way to look at how AI showed up at CS is to think about it as an ecosystem. We had groupings of exhibitors in certain areas related to chips and semiconductors that are enabled or enabling mass compute. Examples of this shown from AMD and Intel. I'm getting an echo back from Sean's Zoom connection. Hardware examples, you had at least one TV manufacturer showing AI-driven display processing as part of its television. You had a keyboard with the Microsoft Copilot key, now a feature, things like this in hardware. You had platforms and engines enabled by AI, and gaming and software development and e-commerce talked about and shown at CS. You had simulations for research, particularly enabled by AI, such as the Dassault Systems Living Heart project. Siemens had a design software suite so you could simulate real objects or things or creations and run experiments and do research on them. And of course, you had many examples across robotics and autonomous systems of how AI is supporting various objectives, whether it's increased crop yields, accessibility for more people and with tech products, or sustainability. Next slide. Another way to look at this is also in terms of groupings across CS this year. We had lots of use cases and lots of applications highlighted. Karine talked a few minutes ago about a lot of the good that is coming as a result of AI, but of course there are real conversations about the risks involved and how to manage and mitigate those. But one great thing about the event is that it really showcased the good that AI is doing across various realms. And we had examples in the automotive sector and in e-commerce, health and wellness, and smart home. I listed a few here that stood out to me and my colleagues as we walked the show floor. Next slide. So looking back, I think 2023, it's fair to say, was a monumental year of policy making around AI, as many of you know. And in fact, many of you, I think, were probably directly involved in one or more of these activities. And this certainly isn't a complete list. But there was a lot that was accomplished last year at the national level, at the international level, through multilateral efforts. This just highlights a few of those milestones. Just about every month, I think we had something achieved or promulgated supporting good governance around AI. But looking forward, and next slide, Anders. Looking forward, there are several things on our radar that we expect to happen. Now, we're based in the US and certainly are engaged in public policy across North America, but keeping our eye on what's happening in Europe and other regions is also important, and we've engaged in some of those policy discussions. But we are focused certainly on what's happening in the US, out of the executive branch of government, out of the current administration, out of the US Congress. paying attention to policy developments at subnational levels, which in the United States is a significant thing. We have 50 states, and many of them, well over 30 anyway, last year introduced legislation concerning AI in one way or another, and that's a lot to keep track of. I think ultimately we want a very organized and innovation-friendly national approach, but policymaking is occurring at different levels of government all at the same time. That's a challenge. We should expect more multinational, international actions, the likes of which Karine described. I think also this year, coming out of Africa, we should have some announcements from that continent too during 2024. And I think the UN just late last year launched an advisory council. So more of these multilateral, multinational efforts will continue this year. And copyright law and AI is a particular area of interest for us and many others, whether it's a legislative approach to the topic, legal and court cases that are pending, or judgments from regulatory bodies, the Copyright Office in the US and others. It's a hot topic. Next slide, please. So as we look at all these policy measures, particularly formative legislation, we're looking at things as basic as how AI is defined, what entities are covered, what are the roles and responsibilities of developers, deployers, and implementers of AI, prohibited uses, how does the legislation go about risk and impact assessments, what kinds of disclosures and transparency requirements are set, and also how are they going to be enforced, and many other aspects. So these are just several dimensions that we examine in pending and legislation from last year, certainly into this year. And next slide, please. I wanted to highlight, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the areas of interest and concern for us and our members. And one of those, of course, is on the compliance side of whatever rules and guardrails are established in countries and regions. 80% of my organization's membership are small and medium-sized enterprises and startups. Yes, we do have many large multinational tech companies as members, but most of our members numerically are smaller entities. And so we're paying careful attention to the relative burdens on that part of the AI ecosystem. It also, along with compliance, are standards that enable companies to go through the conformity assessment process for whatever rules are established. And we want to make sure that there is some recognition of standards from region to region, mutual recognition of standards. Of course, there's international standard setting activity going on now, but there's also quite a lot at the regional level. And that is also an opportunity for mutual recognition, hopefully, between major trading partners. Next slide, please. The notion, well, this is something that's been talked about, at least on the industry side, a few times. As Karine did a great job of outlining, there are a large number of international activities going on, advisory boards, multinational forums, working groups, and so forth. And we're doing our best, we and others are doing our best to track those, in some cases get directly involved, but it is a challenge. And so I just wanted to raise this as an issue as we see this landscape of policymaking unfolding and various stakeholder forums established. We really want to make sure we can plug into them and be helpful. At the same time, we can't be at every one. Nobody can. And it's a challenge, and we certainly want to avoid duplicative efforts around the world too. So where there can be consolidation, streamlining, efficiency, and certainly avoidance of duplication, that helps various stakeholder groups such as mine better engage and manage resources and time to make contributions. It's a practical issue. I realize, of course, that there's global interest in this area and everybody wants to do something. But stakeholder groups are sometimes challenged as to where and how to get engaged. Next slide, please. Well, that wraps it up. So thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity once again to speak as part of this panel this morning or today, and happy to answer questions. Back to you, Anders.
Thank you. Any questions for Doug while I get up the slides?
I have made recording the co-host in case it's needed. Yeah, but go ahead.
So let me just quickly pull up here. Let's see.
Ricardo, you're now the co-host, so if you want to go ahead and share your slides, you can do that.
Baby.
Again, it's João Falcão. Maybe perhaps we call him Ricardo in the past, but his name is João Falcão.
Okay.
Mr. Falcon.
Mr. Falco.
Mr. Falco.
Yes, indeed.
João Falco, please.
Thank you. May I share my slides?
Yes, you may.
Yes, let me stop sharing
you.
on my end, and then you should be able to.
Zoom is asking me to log out and log in again in order to be able to share my slides.
Okay, then you do the same as what
Oh, so something is coming up. I think
there you go.
we're seeing it.
We're seeing it now.
Oh, okay, great.
We see it.
Okay, cool.
Yep, good.
Is it good?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
Good to go.
Okay, great. So, hi everyone. My name is João Falcão. I'm the director of Museu do Amanhã, the Museum of Tomorrows in Rio, Brazil. So today I'm going to share with you how do we see the future of AI in the world. And our intervention is deeply connected to what Karine brought us today, and also what Doug brought us today. And by that I mean we are connecting. We are studying. We are investigating the foundations of AI, as well as dimensions of understanding it. But first, what is the Museum of Tomorrow? So our main exhibition, our permanent exhibition, dives into 5 questions. So the way we design the tomorrows, the different scenarios of tomorrow, is presenting an exhibition and a lot of activities related in order to reflect, answer, debate, and also to present a view on those 5 questions. And those questions you have on the slide, I'm going to read it to you. So where do we come from? Who are we? Where are we? Where are we going? How do we want to get there? So those are the questions we answer in our permanent exhibition that hopefully you all going to have a chance to see here in Rio in March. And we answer those questions with 3 pillars, with 3 key understanding of the world. So first is sustainability, human, plants, earth, oceans, everything pretty much. And then coexistence, the relationship between everything that is related to sustainability. So how do we coexist among us and with animal, plants, environment in a broader sense? And innovation, which is the focus of our talk today. So innovation today, we consider basically AI. So this year in the Museum of Tomorrows, no Museu do Amanhã, This year we have a lot of activities, a lot of panels, a lot of exhibitions, a lot of artist residency in order to look into the future of AI in the world. And why do I mention in the world? Why am I underlining in the world? Because the way we see, we have 100 years of studies related to algorithms, to algorithm systems. We have computer science has at least 100 years of studies dealing with the algorithm system inside the lab, if you will. But now this algorithm system became a complex algorithm system, which is AI, and it's in the wild. It's not in the lab anymore. It's in the world, and it embraces the world's issues problem. AI is not only, as we know by now, not only a math, statistics, logic, and physics issues or problem. It is also a social, political, economic challenge. And the way we see is that we must talk about natural intelligence, and by that I mean sustainability, coexistence, in order to talk about the artificial intelligence, which is innovation. So how is the museum, how are we doing that? How are we doing this investigation of artificial intelligence in the world? So we are using a philosophical framework based on questions. We love questions. They are much better than answers. So we're using a philosophical framework that asks the following questions, for instance. What is AI? What kind of knowledge is embedded in AI? What kind of knowledge do we need to know in order to understand AI? And who should respond for AI consequences? So this is an ontological, epistemological, and ethical framework we are using with a pragmatism glasses. So we are diving into those questions with a pragmatism philosophical glasses, and we came up with 7 dimensions. So we dove into the foundations of AI, asking those questions in order to come up with 7 dimensions of understanding AI. And those are our dimensions. Those are the dimensions so far we are using in order to understand, to read, and to deal with AI. This is our 2% contribution to the panel and to the Brazilian governance of AI. So first, what constitutes AI? What constitutes an algorithm? And here I would like to highlight not hardware, not code, not software, not interface, not big data, but the users. The users of AI algorithms, they are constituents of the algorithm. They are part of the algorithm. They can change the algorithm. They can reprogram the algorithm. So it's a different perspective on what constitutes an algorithm, what constitutes AI. We see the users today as part of what constitutes AI. And then what are the sciences related for us to be able to understand artificial intelligence in the world? Not only physics, not only mathematics, not only logic, but also politics, economics, sociology, anthropology, ethnography. So what are the sciences involved in building algorithms? It's not only engineering, it's not only math, it's not only computing. So a broader perspective of all the science involved in having AI in the world. So this understanding it's quite important to be able to dive into a lot of problems that are coming up with the use of AI in different areas of society, making decisions for society, to society, in society. And levels of abstraction. Levels of abstractions is a quite complex concept that computer science created to understand the complexity of an algorithm system. And our contribution here, we are proposing a new level of abstraction in order to understand AI, and that is purpose. We must be able to ask AI, what is its purpose? Why should society have it as a decision maker? And purpose in the traditional way, vision, mission, and values. We think it's a good idea to ask, what is an AI purpose? Why should society accept it? And then stakeholders. And stakeholders, we must be able to identify all the stakeholders involved in a specific AI system. So who is financing it? Who created? What are the intentions? What is the purpose of those who financed it and created? What are the intentions? What are who's programming? Who's organizing the data? Who's testing the system? So having a clear chain of responsibility, it starts with mapping all the stakeholders involved. And then explicability. Explicability as a means to an end. So as a means to reach ethics. So the way we see, it's hard, or it's barely impossible to have an ethical discussion related to an AI if someone is not able to explain the AI, if someone's not able to understand the AI. So explicability as a means to ethics. So as a means to understand, and it involves transparency, it involves accountability. We chose explicability because we think that it makes this dance with ethics more clear. And then ethics, of course. Is this good or is this bad for society? And at the end, we wrap up our intervention today talking about regulation, but regulation with a pragmatic and pragmatism approach, a pragmatist philosophical approach. And by that, I mean that how could we design and assemble regulation to AI that would foster social justice? And what does that mean in Brazil, in Europe, in the world? So those are 7 knowledge dimensions that we came up so far, that we are putting our contributions in order to foster the debate, the dialogue. And of course, those dimensions are just the first steps, and we expect to come up with different and other dimensions, and keep asking questions more than answers, more than giving answers. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Okay, if I'm going to go back here, and we are ready to, here we go. We go next, we got Dr. Michael Nelson. Do you have any slides, or
I have no slides, and I won't take 10 minutes.
Well, you're more than welcome to do that. No worries.
I'm going to have to drop off soon after 10:30. So thank you very much, Anders. And I'm glad to be able to provide some thoughts at the end of this, and to particularly do some futuring. I've spent a lot of time in my career looking at tech policy, and one thing that I find incredibly useful is to look beyond what we're doing today and even what we're going to be doing in 3 years, and talk about some of the applications that will be possible. And as I do that, I often try very hard to make clear how regulation can get in the way of some of the most exciting things in our future. Anders, is my video showing?
I'm not sure what you mean. Are you going to show a video?
Oh, no, I was just saying is that my image is on the screen, right?
Yes,
the video.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. anyway, as Karine said, ChatGPT has led to this real explosion in interest in artificial intelligence, and also in some of the policy areas that many of us have been working on for 10, 20, in my case, 35 years. And I have to say, this area, artificial intelligence, has led to more misinformation, confusion, and really inaccurate memes than any other area of technology policy I've worked on. And as I said, I came to Washington in 1988 to start working on internet technology with Al Gore. And unfortunately, we know that the law is for bad law. In technology, bad apps lead to bad regulation. And it's particularly true, bad science fiction leads to bad headlines. And this is all causing some very unfortunate discussions among policymakers, and in some cases, laws that are being put in place without any thought to how they'll work and what their long-term implications will be. So what I'm going to do is first start off by talking about what priorities government should focus on, rather than responding to all the memes and the crazy talk that we're hearing around AI. Many of the things I'm going to talk about are mentioned in the WITSA report, but I think the thing that's missing in the WITSA report is a sense of priority. What are the things that we're not paying enough attention to? Personally, I think we're paying far too much attention to what AI could do to us in the year 2040. And we're not paying enough attention to problems that are here right and now, and problems that affect software outside of artificial intelligence. So let me just walk through my list of where we need to really focus more attention. These are areas that are not getting anywhere near the attention they should be. The first one, as was already mentioned, is research and development and education. Obviously, we need a lot more people who understand these technologies, but almost all the focus is on the people who develop artificial intelligence. We need just as many people, actually, we need at least 10 times as many people who are being trained in another discipline, but are getting a minor or getting some expertise in artificial intelligence so they can go into the field they've chosen and use AI more intelligently. I think the Trump administration and the Biden administration have actually done this very well. This was really the first area of focus. But they also missed one other type of education, and that is education for high school students, for college students, on what this technology really does and how they should think about it. This is not how do you build a model or even how do you use ChatGPT. It's just a matter of technology literacy. And again, it doesn't have to focus, it should not just focus on AI. It has to look at the broad sweep of questions around big data, around encryption. There's a lot of issues out here that are all related to AI that are not getting much attention. And I frankly think that AI and all the discussion is diverting us from some very important, actually more important, more immediate tech policy issues. The second place we have to put a lot more time and attention is on smart procurement and making sure governments are smart users of AI. Government was a very early adopter of the internet, and it drove development of technology that worked for users. And that was the big advantage. That was what really made it work. It was a technology built by people who were listening to the users. Third issue, as we've mentioned a few times, is data policy. Often the problem is not with the algorithms. Much more often, it's a matter of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. It's the oldest acronym in computing science, back from the 60s. And yet we're not seeing enough attention on how to get good government data into these systems, how to improve the ability to see bogus data. Third one is consumer protection. We've got most of the laws we need to deal with the problems that we're finding from AI. We have different laws in different sectors, as it should be. We can't have one all-encompassing law that's going to regulate all uses of AI. I think this is totally bogus. It's crazy to go out and think that every AI program is the same. Suppose I'm just doing word processing and I'm using an AI algorithm to check my grammar and to give me suggested language. Well, if I'm doing that in a job where I'm running nuclear reactors, is that a high-risk activity? I don't think so. A high-risk activity would be if the AI was running the nuclear reactor. So we have to understand that not all algorithms are the same and not all uses are the same. In some cases, I might have a very complex software suite. 1% of it might involve AI. That doesn't mean it should now be under some comprehensive AI legislation. So rely on consumer protection law. Don't think you have to come up with some brand new law. Two other places where obviously we need more attention from government. One is explaining, just making sure that high-level people who have the microphone explain what AI is and what it isn't. And again, here's where we're seeing a lot of misunderstanding and myth and a lot of really unfortunate proposals. And the last place is an area we've been working on very hard, cybersecurity. But again, we're not doing everything that needs to be done. The security of databases that are being used in these systems is every bit as important as the security of the algorithms. The Indians have something called the Digital Empowerment and Protection Architecture, which is a very comprehensive approach to building the databases with the security built in that can drive AI and many other applications. Again, I'm very worried that we're so focused on AI, missing the other opportunity of big data. Some things we should not do. We should think about risks, but we should not try to put every little application and every algorithm into a risk category. That's what the European Union AI Act does. It's absolutely insane. There's no way we're going to be able to decide exactly which risks belong, how large the risk is for a particular piece of software or a particular application. Drawing those kind of lines just doesn't work. We should also avoid at all costs freezing the technology, setting premature technology standards, and preventing competition, preventing innovation. We can certainly look at process standards, business process standards, so that we know how systems are being used. But the idea that we're going to somehow standardize AI at this early point is crazy. And export controls is another area where things just don't work very well when we're talking about software. Controls on the chips, maybe. So let me say really quickly, just 8 tweets, 8 things that you should never believe. And if someone says this to you, you should question everything else they say. The first point is that we should be very careful when people use the term AI and try to specify in legislation that that term means something. It's mostly a marketing term. And AI, that word has changed definitions at least 7 times in the last 70 years. So we should avoid trying to draw lines around AI because we can't do that. We can't determine what is AI and what is not. A better way to say it is, if I'm a company, I don't want to be regulated by an AI act, I can just say, oh, I don't have AI, I use advanced analytics. Second point, regulating algorithms is very, very, very impractical, particularly if we're talking about algorithms that change every time you add new data. AI is not magic. It can't do everything. It can't correct for everything. You can't ask it to be perfect. Fourth thing you should never believe is when someone says data is the new oil. Data is not a commodity. Data is something you can copy and share and combine. Data is the new air. That's a much better analogy. Related to that is this idea of data dominance, that one company or one country will somehow control AI because it'll have more data. Again, data moves pretty easily. It's easy to copy it. And the fact is, data quality is a lot more important than data quantity. Another myth that we're hearing is that open source AI is the new plutonium. We had a senator say, well, you didn't open source the Manhattan Project. Well, again, open source is at the heart of most of our technology infrastructure. And a lot of very good AI technology is open source. And if it's open source, it's not going to be controlled by regulators telling a company to change the software because it's built by a community. Seventh tweet, ethical AI doesn't exist. We can't insist that an algorithm is ethical. First off, whose ethics? And second off, any technology can be used or abused. So focus on responsible uses of these technologies. And the last point is big data is important. Big is important, but so is quality, speed, the ability to combine it, the fact that you need to be able to use different types of data, unstructured and the like. So let's think hard about what people are actually saying and the things they believe, because the things they believe is what's going to guide and shape the policies. It's also going to shape what the CEOs decide, what users decide. And most of all, I think we need to fix these myths if we're going to get away from the tech lash that is so much associated with AI. So that's my provocative attempt to say something important at the end of the very full panel. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Mike. Mike, as you are the last panelist, and I understand you have to go in about 8 minutes, would it be prudent maybe to have the audience maybe ask you any particular questions about your presentations before we move on to the next stage? Robert, does that make sense?
Or if one of the other panelists want to challenge my myths and correct my misperceptions. Most of my job for 35 years has been correcting people's misperceptions and stopping stupid stuff. So that's what I do. If anyone has another myth they'd like to put on the table, I'd like to hear it.
So Mike, I just thought I'd offer one challenge. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Robert.
No, go ahead, Doug. I'll go after you, please.
Okay, I'll make it quick. Mike, you mentioned the analogy data and oil. I don't use that myself, but commoditization of data does bring up the question of trade in data, which I think the free flow of data is really important and fundamental to a lot of almost everything that's done in the tech world nowadays, including AI. So you didn't mean to diminish the importance of a free flow of trade across or data across borders, right? I mean, that's still vital, isn't it?
Just the opposite. The fact that people are thinking in terms of data is the new oil and I need data dominance is what's causing people to try to hoard data and keep it inside their own country. And but if we just tell people free flow of data, good thing, what they hear is America wants all my data. If they don't, and because they think data is so important and it's a new commodity, they're going to resist that. If instead they understand data is the new air and it should flow across boundaries and that sharing is what it's about, then we start getting rid of some of the resistance. I fully agree with you. I thank you for asking the question, and it's an area I'm spending a lot of time on right now.
Yeah, so if you were to actually give any government 3 actionable tweets on that position you just highlighted to us, what would be those 3 actionable tweets? What do I do or what do I not do? 3 tops.
Well, the first tweet that we used at the White House when I was working in the Clinton administration was first, do no harm. That's kind of a mega tweet. And we went to Europe and immediately ran into people telling us, first, prevent every imaginable harm. And that was, and luckily, we were able to push that back and explore. And so that's my second tweet. Explore, compete, innovate. And in this area, it's particularly important because governments need to find how AI can fix problems caused by AI. So one of the examples I use about what's the next thing beyond ChatGPT, the next thing beyond ChatGPT is a different algorithm, a different piece of software that checks ChatGPT and corrects it for me. And then the third thing that we really need to focus on is the data and making it user-centric. How do I get my data in a way that I can use it for all sorts of different things? And I think the tweet there is read everything that Sandy Pentland at MIT has written about data unions. This is the foundation of the digital transformation and the foundation of artificial intelligence. So those are my three mega suggestions.
Before I pass it on to Karine, because she raised her hand, and I know you need to go pretty soon. I just want to, you're talking about data not being oil and being the air. I was thrown over to the same situation that Nicholas Carr retracted in his book, The Big Switch, when he talked about the energy, the electric power, when it was actually harnessed first in a very concentrated way, and then eventually it became, distributed worldwide. So I see a similarity to what you're saying, data is air, to the same situation which Nicholas Carr described in his book, The Big Switch. I don't know if you've read it or not, but if you have, so yeah, very, very similar. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great question. Karine?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, so I have to say I agree with most of your points, but because I'm looking at what's happening in a lot of countries, there's a bunch of nuances that I'd add, because the things are not happening the same way everywhere. In fact, they're happening quite differently in different jurisdictions. And so, for example, saying, for example, that what's happening 40 years out is not something we should focus on now. I don't know if, and again, I don't think many people are really focusing 40 years out. I think those 40 years have turned into 30, then they turned into 20, and now it's more like 10, and sometimes it's more like 5. So it's going quicker and quicker. And I don't think we can afford to not look at what's happening and what might have longer term repercussions, and I'm not saying that means that we shouldn't focus even more on what's happening in the short term, but I don't think we can afford to choose one over the other. And that I think we just have to,
Well, I'm gonna push back really hard, because we're having these high level summits where leaders of countries are coming to talk about frontier models and, where is this technology going to take us in 10, 20 years, and will it be the end of civilization? They should be driving discussions on these other issues, particularly issues where different parts of their own government are arguing with each other. So whether it's facial recognition or other types of surveillance, or how do we make government data available, there's all these really tough issues. And the prime minister has to get the ministers to work together to solve those problems. And instead, they're going off to London and Seoul, and they're having these grand talks for 2 or 3 hours, 2 days with the overlords of AI, the CEOs who are doing all this stuff. And they're not solving immediate problems. So I agree, we need to talk about that, but we don't need the prime minister and the president speculating on things that will happen after they're out of office.
Yeah, I think they are doing both. And in the case of the prime minister being there, he's hosting it, fine. And also a lot of other things were happening. They're not just focusing on that. They're focusing on a lot of other things at the same time, at the G7, at New York, and everywhere you want. And
as I said, G7, G7 is incredibly useful. I love everything you're doing at the OECD. It's the one international organization I consistently praise. But these AI summits on frontier models, AI safety summits are almost like they are a distraction. And they're telling people that we're actually getting something done about the hard question.
Mike, I might have agreed with you in the past, but I think that the problem with these kinds of issues is that it's really hard to get people to focus on what's a long-term issue. And we've always had this collective action problem, and it's really hard. Of course, we're worried about tomorrow, next year. We're worried about, so getting that high level of attention is just super hard. They are focused on their immediate political cycles, which is normal. That's their job, their livelihoods, and so on. And same thing for their governments and re-election. And being able to do that focus is quite exceptional, and it doesn't happen that often. We usually always wait until it's, like too late or almost too late. And so for me, it's been very positive to see that, oh, well, actually, we can, there could be a grown-up in the room. I mean, I'm exaggerating, or it's not that not being grown-up to focus on what's exactly happening today, but also like just make sure that we're doing things right, so that we're setting up safety institutes, and it doesn't have to be as high profile as it was, but it got the attention. But the rationale and the benefit of having it being the first, at least being high profile, it's been happening. I mean, the low profile discussions on these topics are happening. There's no issue with that. They're happening. Responsible folks are thinking about that. But it's hard for them to get any impetus, any research funding for things that are pertain to collective action and so on. So for me, I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's the only. I think the rest is very important.
Well, I'm picking on one particular series of summits because they're focusing on the companies. They're focusing on the algorithms. They're not focusing on the users, and they're ignoring some of the most important issues like free flow of data.
Is the users, okay. And where the free flow of data is everywhere. So it's not like nobody's talking about it. Everyone's only talking about that if
we're not resolving it. Anyway, I'm sorry, I have to leave. I really apologize, but thank you for some very good talks. And I did leave my my email in the chat, so people can get back to me if they have detailed questions, or if they want to tell me why I'm all wrong. Thanks, Anders, for the chance to be here.
Mike, it's welcome.
Thank you, Mike.
Always. Thank you very much for your insights, as always.
Good sharing.
Thank you. So, Robert, I'm going to put the slides back up here. We are finished with our presentations. We are kind of out of time. The question is whether we want to spend a few more minutes on any additional questions for the remaining panelists.
What I'd like to do, and what I'd like to suggest is that the same question I made Mike, I'd like to have the other panelists also give their 2 cents worth of what would be the 3 top actionable items they would be recommending the policymakers to be considering currently. So I'd like to hear from Karine and Doug and João Falcão. What would be their 3 top actionable items?
So Robert, if I may start.
Yes, go ahead, John.
Okay, so the way I see it is we should face all those challenges with a pragmatic approach. So that's why we brought into our intervention today pragmatist philosophy, and I'm talking about American pragmatist philosophy. It's a pity that Mike had to leave, because the way he talks about regulation, that it's something impractical, not practical. I mean, unless you have a practical approach, unless you use a pragmatic approach, unless you use a philosophical pragmatism framework, and then it's a good, it's first steps to understand, for instance, AI contexts. We must consider not only data, but the context the AI is making decision. And within those contexts, there are active agents, and how those active agents relate to the algorithm, to the AI. So our tweet on that would be face those challenges that we all share here today, face those challenges with a pragmatic approach using pragmatist philosophy. It's helping a lot our research to find, at least to design better questions.
Karine, please.
Yes, so I'm not sure, can you hear me? Yeah, I'd echo what João was saying, and maybe say a little bit more in the policy sense, where we do have a lot of regulations in different jurisdictions, in the EU, in the US, in China, in Brazil, and in international organizations like many of them. And I think that here my number one I think priority would be that policymakers focus on global interoperability between these different frameworks, because they're all similar but different enough to pose burden, and this goes back to the practical component, to pose additional burdens on those who have to implement them, and often those who have to implement them are going to be companies, because they're the ones that are developing and deploying to a large extent AI systems, including when they're used in public procurement, in public services, and so on. And this focus on global interoperability in many instances is going to have to go through standards, because when you have a regulation or policy framework, the way to operationalize it in a technical context is going to be through standardization. And so these standards have to be able to be at least equivalent to one another, or normally, ideally taught to one another. And that's very, very important, again, so that businesses can focus on implementing one standard as opposed to 20, and then focus on, well, what does it mean, and why are they implementing the standard, and what is it, rather than just following the standard, what is the purpose of it, and what is the end goal of a standard, which is going to be safety, or is going to be protecting certain rights, and so on. And the second one would be that is related, is to focus on the linkages between the different regulatory frameworks and regulations that we already have. So we've got a whole, and I think Mike might have spoken of this, we have a whole consumer protection legislation that applies to fraud, or commerce, or product safety, things that impact consumers purchasing goods or services. We have a whole framework for privacy. We have many frameworks for fairness. We have human rights legislation. We have a lot of that. There are a few things where maybe we don't have much. For example, we don't have much regulation on, are people even allowed to create fake, disinformation, or things that are but we do have a lot. And it's true that recreating the wheel makes it more complicated, because it might be slightly different than what we already had. And so it might call for reconciling things that could be different. And so focusing on those linkages between the policy areas that are all impacted by AI is really important. And then I think the third point I'd make is really about and again, emphasizing something that Mike said, that the educational component, I think a lot is taking place, and many countries have been front runners in that area. I'm thinking particularly of Finland and some of the Scandinavian countries that have programs to educate the entire population. And they also go down to secondary schools. And there's a lot to learn from what other countries have been doing. I mean, not to advertise or anything, but we do put a lot of, we do actually track what's different countries are doing in different areas pertaining to AI, you know, for example, in education, in skills building and so on. And so there's this emerging body of good practices of things that work and that generate outputs that are beneficial. So that's a little longer than tweet. I'm not a Twitter or tweeter, so I don't know how to do that.
Thank you, Karine. Very good. Doug, I think you're up.
Yes, thank you. So with the time, well, I guess we're over time. Three quick things. It's not all about regulations. Of course, rules are needed, guardrails are needed, but there's a lot that's happened that's non-regulatory and a lot that needs to happen that's non-regulatory, including standards and continued voluntary efforts, good governance, risk management frameworks, and things of this nature. Second, we should not lose sight of the good that AI is doing today, similar to a point that I think Mike was making during his presentation, but there's a lot happening today that needs to be recognized and needs to be addressed. We, just like at our trade show a few days ago, we need to highlight those great examples that are out there of AI doing good in all sorts of fields. We're certainly on a hype curve right now with AI, like we have been with other tech in the past, but we should not lose sight of the good that's out there and make sure that policymakers understand that. And lastly, of course, we need to get the policy right. I'm speaking, of course, from the perspective of somebody in the United States, but I think it's generally true in regions and countries around the world. We should be striving for a policy on AI that strikes the right balance, that is innovation and competition friendly, and does the best for consumers and the economies out there. So I think what's happened with the AI Act in Europe is not the right way to go. A lot of people work really hard on that. There are some good elements to it, but there are some problematic elements as well. I don't think it's a template for the world to follow, and we do need better examples out there. That's it.
Yeah, Doug, I just wanted to highlight that you actually wrote a very good article a few weeks ago on a critique of the AI Act. I thought was very insightful.
Right. I think that the headline there was being first is not always being doesn't guarantee that you're a winner or something like that. But look, I don't want to dish the work product entirely. There are some very good elements to it, but there are some challenges and problems that we'd rather not see copied or duplicated. So that's the nature of it. And anyway, we're watching that space and trying to improve upon it.
Well,
Robert,
yes, I guess we're coming here to the end. We are at overtime. And on behalf of the AI task force for WITSA, I want to thank our panelists, Mike that has gone, Karine and Doug and João Falcão. This has been a great discussion. We're going to make this recording available later for everyone. And yes, so in behalf of the task force for WITSA and Assespro locally, I want to thank you very much for your contribution. And Anders, back to you.
Thank you very much. I realize we're out of time, so I just want to thank everybody. I think this has been very insightful. We will make this recording available to all of our members. So for those who were not able to participate, we will of course share it with everyone on this call shortly as well. So thank you so much for everybody again for your time. I appreciate a great discussion. Thank you.